Esto es El Club de la Limonada, con Sandy Mora, un podcast sobre desarrollo del potencial humano, resiliencia, alquimia emocional y motivación. Bienvenidos. Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo están? Bienvenidos a un episodio más del Club de la Limonada, sacándole jugo a la vida. Yo soy Sandy Mora. Y el día de hoy estoy de manteles largos, no tienen una idea cómo. Tengo una invitada sasasazo de lujo y se los voy a presentar. Él es el doctor Tal Ben-Shahar. Es un renombrado maestro y autor a nivel global en áreas de felicidad y liderazgo. Después de graduarse de Harvard en filosofía, psicología y con un doctorado en comportamiento organizacional, Tal impartió lo que durante varios años fue la clase más popular, las clases más populares en la historia de la Universidad de Harvard, de psicología positiva y psicología de liderazgo. Tal es un prolífico escritor, sus libros han aparecido varias veces en las listas de bestsellers en Estados Unidos y ha traducido a más de 30 idiomas sus libros. Entre sus libros se encuentran La búsqueda de la felicidad, Elige la vida que quieres, 101 claves para no amargarse la vida y ser feliz, y Ser feliz es decisión tuya, herramientas de la psicología positiva para incrementar tu productividad y tu felicidad, entre muchos otros. Tal es consultor y enseña a ejecutivos en corporaciones multinacionales, a instituciones educativas y al público en general sobre liderazgo, felicidad, autoestima, resiliencia, ética, planteamiento de metas y mindfulness. Es cofundador de la Happiness Studies Academy o la Academia de Estudios de Felicidad y es creador e instructor del certificado en estudios de la felicidad que yo también estoy estudiando. Tal es como un puente entre las tradiciones de Oriente y de Occidente, entre la sabiduría ancestral y la tecnología moderna, la ciencia y el arte, la academia y la sabiduría popular, y de verdad no tienen una idea lo feliz que estoy. Voy a pasar a inglés para hacer la entrevista y, bueno, los que lo estén viendo en YouTube lo van a ver con subtítulos, los que lo estén oyendo en radio lo van a escuchar doblado. Entonces, Tal, I'm so happy to have you here. So grateful and so blessed. Thank you so much. It's a great honor.
Thank you, Sandy. I'm really glad to be here.
So let me start because I know we have limited time. Every time I do an interview, I ask people, because this is called the Lemonade Club. So it's based on the very cliche phrase that when life gives you lemons, you do lemonade. And the question that I usually do to the people that I interview is, what has been the most bitter or sour lemon that you've had in your life, and how did you manage to make lemonade out of it if you did?
I can think of two things with your permission. One which is an event, and the other which is more of a trait, a character. So when it comes to a character trait, I think the biggest lemon that I received was that I inherited a very strong inclination towards anxiety. And I remember experiencing from a very young age, whether it was in school, later on it was playing squash, in sports, then it was when I was in university, then it was at work and in my relationships. And it was something that was always present, and I remember thinking, it would be so wonderful not to have this anxiety constantly, feeling this constricted throat or a knot in my belly. Or pressure in my chest. These were all too familiar for me as a child and as a young adult. So what's the lemonade here? I often think about the fact that if I did not experience anxiety, there is no chance that I would have studied psychology. There is no chance that I would have studied, the science of happiness, because I became interested in happiness because of my own unhappiness. And I love this field, and I'm passionate about what I do, and I'm very grateful for what I do. And in a sense, I'm grateful for the anxiety. So that's the character trait. The second thing that I want to say, and I have to say something before it, we can and we should turn, when we can, lemon into lemonade. But that doesn't mean that everything happens for the best.
Yes.
I often say that while things don't happen for the best, we can choose to make the best of things that happen. Because sometimes things happen and it's terrible, and it's a lemon and we wish it had never happened, and yet we can still learn and grow from it. So when I was 27 years old, I lost my best friend in a plane crash. And that is by far the most, it was my best friend in the world. And we were supposed to meet. And as a result of the plane crash, we didn't. She was on her way to see me. And that was the most devastating, bitter, hard experience in my life. Now, I wish I could reverse that. I wish that had never happened, but it did. And there was nothing I could do about it. And as a result of that experience, I think I do have a lot more empathy towards people who experience loss of a loved one. It made me more sensitive, and also I often think about we were both philosophers, or young up and coming philosophers, and I often think about my work as being inspired by our friendship, our relationship.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, and I think it's very, very powerful what you're saying. Speaking about this, you have a book that it's called Happier No Matter What. And I also was introduced by you to the concept of antifragility. A year ago, you introduced me to that term, which it's very similar to what I call emotional alchemy. I love that term, and I've been using it since. And I wanted to ask you, is it really possible to be happier, to try to be happier no matter what is going on, and how do you acquire these qualities of anti-fragility?
So let me say just a few words about anti-fragility and then respond to your question. So anti-fragility is essentially, the way I see it, resilience 2.0. So resilience 1.0, the original meaning, is when you put pressure on something, say a piece of rubber, it goes back to its original form. Or when you drop a ball, it bounces back up. Anti-fragility takes this to the next level. It's about putting pressure on something, and it's not just resilient, going back to where it was before. It actually grows stronger as a result of the pressure that was put on it. Or you drop a ball, it doesn't just bounce back up, it bounces back higher. So that's anti-fragility, growing through as a result of hardship. Now, the question is it always possible? The answer is no, it's not. And sometimes we break. In other words, sometimes we are fragile, and there are certain experiences that put us or other people down, and there is no recovery. There are long-term consequences. I think of so many people suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. They had a rough experience, whether it was at war or whether it was as a result of being abused or a crime, and that ruins their lives. The thing about anti-fragility is that it's usually, not always, but usually possible to grow from hardship. And the question that we have to answer is, how do we increase the likelihood that we will grow from hardship? So how do we increase the likelihood that we will grow from a loss, or from abuse, or from witnessing some horrific things in war, or as a result of a crime? How can we increase the likelihood, not guarantee, but increase the likelihood that we will grow? And the first thing that I would point out to is that we first need to experience the pain. There is a research on people who experience loss, and it's research that I encountered after my loss. And what the research shows is that essentially you can take people who have lost someone dear to them, and you divide them into two groups. The one group, after the loss, say to themselves and to the world, I'm going to get through this. I'm tough. I'm not going to let this bring me down. And, everyone, of course, looks at them from the outside and says, wow, they're so strong. Well done. The second group, very different. They actually break down. They cry, they talk about it. They don't look good. And when we look, or when most people look at them from the outside, what do they say? I'm really concerned about this person. They're not looking as if they're going to get through this. But interestingly, when you look at these two groups, a year later, the group that actually broke down, that didn't look good, they are much more likely to do well, to do better than the first group who was tough. In other words, they are more likely to grow from the experience than the group who didn't allow themselves to experience the full range of human emotions, the natural response to loss and to hardship and to difficulty. So experiencing that pain is a very important first step in growing through that pain.
I totally agree with you. And speaking about that, culturally, we've been, or in most cultures, but probably not everyone, but it's very general that we've been conditioned not to show our feelings. And to be, you have to learn to control your emotions. You get judged, and showing yourself as a vulnerable human being turns out to be perceived as a weakness. So a lot of people that I work with and that I know, and including myself in the past, we refrain from showing our emotions because we've been trained to do it. And that's very, very counterproductive. Also, there's this, paradoxically, or maybe not, there is this inclination or cultural trend to be constantly positive and to be, it's not only suck it up, but it's also, oh, everything is fine. You don't need to worry, smile, and the force will be with you, and, all that toxic positivity that I call it. And so why do you stress so much? And I think you part of the answer, you already gave it to us, but why is it so important? And that's something that a phrase that I love from you, that it's why it's so important to give ourselves permission to be human, because so many times we don't.
Because the foundation of happiness is first allowing in unhappiness. We cannot experience life to its fullest if we reject painful emotions. What happens when we reject painful emotions is two things. First thing, those painful emotions that we're trying to reject, they only grow stronger, they intensify. So if I would say to myself, come on, Tal, you're a happiness expert. You shouldn't experience anxiety. What immediately happens is my anxiety levels skyrocket, they go up. Or another example, let's say I say to myself, Tal, you shouldn't be envious of your best friend. Come on, you should be a nice person. Envy towards your best friend or a family member. What immediately happens is that the envy that I experienced goes right up. In Buddhism, for thousands of years, and more recently in modern research, there is talk of two levels of suffering. The first level of suffering is something that everyone experiences. We all experience suffering when we're angry as a result of something, or sadness as a result of loss, or frustrated as a result of something not happening as we expected it to happen. These are natural human emotions. That's the first level of suffering, which is inevitable. The Dalai Lama experiences it, and the world's leading psychologists experience it. But then there is a second level of suffering, and that second level comes when we reject the first level, saying to ourselves, I shouldn't experience this frustration or anxiety or envy, and then these painful emotions go up. While the first level is inevitable, the second level is really up to us. Because if we accept and embrace the painful emotions, then we're going to stay at the same level, and these emotions will pass just as they came. Whereas if we reject them, if we fight them, they will not only grow stronger, they will also stay longer. The second reason why it's important to embrace and accept painful emotions is because all of our emotions, no exception, flow through one pipeline. We have one emotional pipeline. Now, if we if we reject the painful emotions and we stop the free flow of painful emotions, we're also stopping the free flow of pleasurable emotions. So if I don't allow myself to experience anxiety, I will also not fully experience excitement. If I reject sadness, I'm also inadvertently rejecting joy. If I reject envy, I'm also inadvertently rejecting love. Golda Meir, who was the Israeli prime minister back in the 1970s, once said, those who cannot weep with their whole heart cannot laugh either. Two sides of the same coin.
Two sides of the same coin. And talking about this and taking it to the workplace, we've talked a little bit about the importance of, bringing this acceptance and inclusion. I talk about inclusion and diversity of emotions in the workplace. So What's your point of view there? Because if culturally we're conditioned not to show our feelings, I mean, the workplace is the place where you never show your feelings, So in your experience, because I know you work worldwide with big companies to introduce more of a well-being culture, what's the importance of including emotions into the leadership mindset and into the culture of the companies, and what does that have to do, or not doing that beforehand has to do with this phenomenon of the great resignation and people leaving their jobs because, I mean, emotionally they're overcharged and they haven't been able to, to accommodate all those emotions, and the workplace doesn't allow them.
Yeah. No, I think this is a huge issue in the workplace. And let me share a study which I think can be very helpful. It's a study that was conducted long before the Great Resignation, long before Corona, but it's very relevant today. And this is a study done on service providers. Now, most people working for organizations today are service providers. A manager provides service to clients and provides service to her employees. A person working in a bank is a service provider. A person working in a shop is a service provider. A person, working as an engineer is a service provider, because we all have clients. We all have people we serve. Now, what the research showed was that service providers pay a very high psychological price, and as a result, physiological price, more so than people who are not called on to provide service. Now, the question is why? Because service providers, more than others, cannot give themselves the permission to be human. For instance, let's say I work in a bank and I'm a bank teller, and the client comes in and I welcome them and they say, hello, how are you? And my response is, thank you so much for asking. I've had a terrible day. I had an argument with my partner this morning and nothing seems to be going well. Actually, I hate my job. Thank you so much for, what's going to happen? The person standing in front of me is going to run as fast as they can. I can't afford to do that. It's not part of the job description of a service provider. And we see it with so many employees, even managers. Think about the corona. So many managers were going through hard time and uncertainty and challenges during these times. They couldn't wear their heart on their sleeves all the time. They couldn't say, I'm so scared. I haven't been sleeping. I don't know where our company is going. We're in trouble. They very often had to say, we're going to pull through this together. In other words, they had to put on a facade, just like that bank teller has to put on a facade. In other words, no permission to be human. And the price is extremely high, psychologically, physiologically. What's the solution then? Not easy. And it's even more difficult when you're talking about certain cultures, because there are cultures where it's more acceptable to share your emotions. There are some cultures where it's a big no-no. You can't express your emotions, neither pleasurable nor painful emotions. What does an employee do there? They're likely to get fired if they share too much. Here is the solution. It's okay to put on a mask. It's okay to put on a facade. It's okay to appear tough or collected, even when inside you're feeling awful. It's okay as long as you have what Professor Brian Little from Cambridge University calls restorative niches. In other words, places, spaces in your life where you can be real, authentic, where you can and do give yourself the permission to be human. It could be later on when you go home and you talk to your best friend. It could be over lunch when you're speaking to your colleague whom you trust. It could be with your boss or employee or friend or a coach. It actually doesn't matter, but you need an outlet, a place where you can restore yourself, where you can fully express your emotions. Without that place, service providers at every level of the organization will continue to pay a price and pay an even higher price because we are going through such difficult times now as a society.
Yes, we are. And I think it's very, very important. I agree with you that, and you've been traveling the world and you know a lot of cultures, but speaking specifically here in Mexico, I do believe that introducing psychological safety to the workplace is a very important thing to do. And I do think that right now, the times we're living in and what, the Great Resignation is showing is that as a company, either you take the emotional responsibility of, engaging at that level with your employees, or probably you're going to lose a lot of talent, and probably a lot of companies won't have a future if people leave, so I think it's very important. And regarding that, because I think that three pillars, very important pillars in order to introduce these to the companies, is obviously leadership, the teams, and working on giving team members tools to become anti-fragile, but also the culture. And I mean, obviously I know that you've been working and you developed a model for happiness and well-being. And I wanted you to tell us a little bit more about this SPIRE model. What do you mean when you talk about whole being?
There are different models of happiness, of course, and some models are simply equate happiness with pleasure. Other models are more focused on meaning. Others talk more about the body. And my take is to bring them all in, and to create a model of happiness that looks at the different parts of the individual, and not just the individual in the context of a group. So what I talk about is whole person well-being, or in one word, whole being. And when we talk about whole person well-being, we need to look at at least five different elements of the person. The first element is spiritual well-being. Spiritual well-being can, of course, be found through religion for many people, but it doesn't have to be. It can also come through a deep sense of meaning and purpose in one's work, in one's life. Spiritual well-being can come through being mindful, being present, whether it is doing meditation, whether it's praying, whether it's being present at work, where we experience a sense of connectedness. This is spiritual well-being, connected to the present moment. Then there is physical well-being. Physical well-being is about nutrition. It's about exercise. There is research showing, for instance, that regular exercise contributes to our well-being to the same extent that our most powerful psychiatric medication does. Then there is, and by the way, at any age, whether we're talking children, we're talking adults, or the elderly, physical well-being is about recovery. It's about sleep. It's about touch. So that's the second element of whole being. The first one is spiritual well-being. The second is physical well-being. The third is intellectual well-being. This is about curiosity. There is research came out recently showing that people who are curious, who ask questions, who are always learning new things, are not just happier, they also live longer. So, I don't know if you have it in Spanish, the saying that curiosity kills the cat.
Yes.
Well, it may kill the cat, but it makes humans live longer. Deep learning, whether it's learning from books or from lectures, or learning about nature, or deeply engaging with the work of art, these are all ways of exercising our intellectual faculty and contributes to intellectual well-being. Then there is relational well-being. The number one predictor of happiness is quality time we spend with people we care about and who care about us. Now, relationships are important anywhere, of course, in our personal lives at home. They're also important in the workplace. And one of the reasons for their importance is because what healthy relationships in the workplace do is provide us with restorative niches. Because when I have someone to talk to, someone to share with in the workplace, I'm much more likely to stay there. In other words, part of the Great Resignation is as is a result of relationships being lost as a result of being away from the workplace. And there is less glue that brings people together, that holds people together in the organization. So relationships matter for well-being. They matter for the well-being of an organization as well. And finally, emotional well-being. And we talked about emotional well-being, and you talk a lot about it in your wonderful book about the importance of allowing the emotions to flow through us, giving ourselves the permission to be human, dealing with painful emotions, as well as cultivating pleasurable emotions like gratitude, like joy, like excitement and love. So these 5 elements, spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional, and together they make up the acronym SPIRE. They contribute to our overall happiness, to our whole person well-being, to our whole being.
And I would like to point out that, I would like to hear your definition. I know it, but I want people to know it, of what is happiness. And if happiness is a place that you arrive at, is it a feeling that you feel? What is it? What do you, in your words, how would you describe happiness?
Yeah. So happiness includes these 5 elements of well-being. Happiness is about finding a sense of meaning and purpose in life, spiritual well-being. Happiness is about leading a healthy life, whether it's exercise or nutrition, physical well-being. Happiness is about learning and growing and asking questions and delving deeply into a work of art or nature or a book, intellectual well-being. Happiness is about our relationships at work, at home, with our family, friends. That's relational well-being. And finally, happiness is about embracing all emotions. It's about cultivating pleasurable emotions like pleasure and joy and gratitude. So when we talk about happiness, we can't just talk about 1 or 2 of these elements. We need to talk about the 5 elements. Now, does this mean that at every moment, all 5 need to be extremely high for us to lead a happy life? Of course not. That's not possible. It's not realistic. However, what it does mean that overall in life, we need to take care to some degree, not to the same degree, but to some degree, we need to take care of all these 5 elements, nourish them, cultivate them, and that's how we flourish.
So it is not a state of, an emotional state only, but it's something that you have to build step by step and every day. And it's something that you need to cultivate, because I'm very sad that the term happiness, for some people, it means so much that it turns down to anything, because they don't know. I mean, they don't know how to define it and how to look for it. And something that I've heard you say is that the more you pursue happiness, the more unhappy you become. How is that?
Yeah, Sandy, I'm glad you brought this up, because this is such an important point, and it's such a real barrier to happiness for so many people. And this is based on research by Iris Moss. And what Iris Moss showed was that people who wake up in the morning and say to themselves, I want to be happy, or I am going to pursue happiness, or happiness is really important to me, they actually end up being less happy. Paradoxically, they're more likely to experience loneliness and depression even. This research is problematic, because who doesn't want to be happier? And especially given the fact that we know that increasing levels of happiness makes us more creative and more productive and physically healthier, and it leads us to enjoy better relationship and actually live longer. So what, you're telling me I shouldn't value happiness? I shouldn't wake up in the morning and say, I want to pursue happiness? So how do we resolve this paradox that on the one hand, it is really important and we all want it, but on the other hand, we're told, don't pursue happiness, don't want it too much. It's not good for you.
Don't get your expectations too high.
Yeah. So how do we resolve this paradox? The answer is that we pursue happiness indirectly. And let me explain. So let's say, I go outside and it's a nice sunny day, and then I look up at the sun. What will happen? My eyes will burn. It will hurt me because I'm looking at the sun directly. But what if I take the sunlight and then take a prism and break that sunlight in that prism, I'll get the colors of the rainbow. And then I can look at these colors of the rainbow, enjoy them, savor them. In other words, what I'm doing is I'm looking at the rays of sun indirectly. I break the ray down into its elements and then observe the elements. It's the same with happiness. If I break down happiness into its elements, specifically the spire elements, spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional, and then pursue these elements, not pursue happiness, the sunlight, but pursue the colors of the rainbow, the elements of spire, then I can become happier. That's how I resolve the paradox. So if I wake up in the morning and I say to myself, I want to be happier, I'm going to pursue happiness, that will actually hurt me. But if I wake up in the morning and I say, I want to find more meaning in my work, or I'm going to invest more in my relationships, or I'm going to learn more, or I'm going to exercise regularly, or I'm going to keep a journal and give myself the permission to be human, or keep a journal and write about the things that I'm grateful for, then what I'm doing through all these things, I'm pursuing happiness indirectly through the spire elements. So when I pursue more meaning, spiritual well-being, when I exercise more physical well-being, when I learn more intellectual well-being, when I spend more time with my loved ones, relational well-being, when I do the gratitude exercise, expressing appreciation for what I have, emotional well-being, indirectly pursuing happiness.
And I also think that that makes it more attainable and more easy to find different ways and different strategies and different tools to become happier. But also, I think that I love about the way you teach is that there's a lot of, academic research where you can find a lot of tools, different tools that have already been measured, that have results, but you also bring, the wisdom of ancient wisdom that also can help. And you're not dogmatic. I mean, you say there's a lot of research, but you have to do your me search. You have to try and test and see what works for you. So can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Sure. When you study happiness, it's very important to look at it at three levels. The first level is the universal level. And that is what is common to all human beings everywhere and anytime. Well, some of the things are the spire elements. We all need a sense of meaning and purpose in life. We all need sleep. We all need to move and exercise. We all need relationships. We all have experience painful emotions. These are universal truths. The second level is around culture. Mexico is different than the United States. China is different than Kenya. And we need to understand cultural differences because relationships look different. I've spent a lot of time in Mexico, and the relationships are different in Mexico. People are much warmer. There are more hugs in Mexico than there are in Japan, for example. Now, does this mean that for the Japanese, relationships are not important? Of course they are. They're expressed in a different way. There are cultural differences that are important to keep in mind. Some cultures are more collectivistic. Some are more individualistic. Not necessarily good or bad, different. So we need to understand different cultures. And then the third level is the individual. Because, Sandy, even if you were raised and you live in Mexico, your next door neighbor is very different from you. So, you may be more of an extrovert and like being around many people, and your next door neighbor may be an introvert and, he may like being one-on-one. Still, relationships are important to both of you. You're from the same culture, and yet there are individual differences. Now, here is the thing. When it comes to the universal and the cultural, we have research for that. And there's a lot of research on each one of the spire elements and beyond. There's a lot of research on cross-cultural differences. When it comes to the individual, it's not about research. It's about me search. It's about asking yourself, what's important to me? What's meaningful to me? Because what's meaningful to you is different than what's meaningful to me, or what's meaningful to your brother or sister who was raised in the same culture, in the same home. There are still differences. And exploring the self, engaging in me search, is very important for us to do if we are to maximize our levels of well-being.
So there's no one size fits all. There's a whole wardrobe and you need to try it on.
Mahatma Gandhi wrote his autobiography, and the title of the autobiography was My Experiments with Truth. It wasn't my finding truth. It wasn't the ultimate truth. It was my experiments with truth. And there's a very important message here for all of us. We need to experiment. We need to try, and I love the metaphor of a wardrobe. We need to try on different attires and see what fits. And by the way, what fits today may not fit in a year, or what didn't fit yesterday may fit very well tomorrow.
So there are no absolutes. And also I like that you emphasize always the power of the and, that you can try this and still do that, or you can feel this and also, be able to. So what's the importance of allowing yourself not to be so fixated on right and wrong, good or bad, being more open on that? How does that help for happiness?
Yeah, one of the most important traits and characteristics for happiness is being humble. And humble in what way? Humble in the understanding that there is so much that we don't know, that there is so much out there for us to learn. Because when we come in with this attitude, an attitude of openness, an attitude of the desire to learn, not an attitude of, I already know, I already have the answers, that makes life so much easier. That takes away so much of the pressure and stress, because the belief that I have the answers and that I already know puts a lot of pressure on us. Because what if I think I know it all, and then I experience a difficult encounter, or something happens that throws me off? At that point, my immediate response, if I think I know it all, is okay, so what's the solution? But what if I don't have the solution? Then I'm going to feel even worse. Whereas if I go into the experience and say, okay, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn, I'm open to learn, that immediately takes the pressure off and puts me in a different mindset, a mindset that is open to ideas rather than a mindset that is shut off and closes. And the thing is that if we are to navigate this very complex world, we need to have this openness. We need to have this flexibility in terms of our thinking. Flexibility, openness are key have always been key, even more so in the 21st century.
And coming to that question, it has to do with this. What do you think right now, in the times that we're living in, the situation as it is, what do you think is the biggest challenge as humanity regarding happiness and the pandemic and the technology changes that are coming our way? What do you think it's the most challenging thing that we as human beings need to focus on and work on to, be able to navigate all these?
There are so many challenges today, and I don't know if you watch the movie Don't Look Up.
Yes.
It's a very important movie that talks to our reluctance to look at the challenges that we're facing directly. That it's a movie about us running away from our challenges, and we have challenges. And the challenge of the environment is real, because if we're talking about happiness, no one's going to be happy if we destroy the environment. The challenge of technology is real. The number one addiction today, it's not gambling, it's not alcohol, it's not drugs. The number one addiction today are the screens, whether it's social media, whether it's pornography, whether it's games. And people are ruining their lives. More and more children are becoming depressed. More and more children and adults are committing suicide because of that addiction. And we see a direct connection between rising levels of suicides and depression and screen addiction. We need to deal with that. Parents need to deal with that. Schools need to do something about that. So these are real challenges. And there are real solutions to these challenges, but the solutions are not easy, not on an individual level and not on a collective level. These are the important questions that we as individuals, as teachers, as parents, as politicians must think about it. We need to look up. We need to deal with the problem that's the problems that are facing us.
Okay, Tal, thank you. Thank you so much for this answer, because I really think that also some people would think that, focusing on your happiness means, you see your small piece of world. And if you go and look everything that's going on, you're going to get depressed. But there's a way, as long as you work yourself with what you can do and, in your square meter of influence, you do something about it, we'll all be better off. So I really agree with you. Tal, so we can finish this interview. If today you were to leave one seed to flourish in the garden of the people that are hearing or seeing us, what would you like it to be?
Keep in mind that becoming happier is like becoming better at any skill. And that just as it's not enough to read a book on tennis or hear a podcast about tennis to become a tennis player, or to read a book on the piano and then listen to a lecture on playing piano, that's not enough to become a good piano player. The same with happiness. It takes work, it takes practice. So what I would encourage, and the seed I would like to plant is encourage whoever is listening today to pick one or two practices, whether it's meditation or exercise, if you're not already exercising, or gratitude, or writing and keeping a journal, or spending an extra hour a week with your loved ones. Pick any behavior and apply it consistently in your life so that you can increase your levels of happiness, and by extension, because happiness is contagious, affect the happiness of those around you.
Thank you so much, Tal. And if people want to know more about you, or want to know more about HSA and the certificate, or hire you for conferences or for lectures, where's the best place to find you?
Yes, so on my website, which is talbenshahar.com, there are links to the Happiness Studies Academy and to the certificate program that we offer, and and you can get a hold of me for any question that you have, whether you're an individual or an organization.
Tal, thank you so much. You have no idea what this means to me. And this is probably one of the best highlights of the year, I'm pretty sure. So thank you so much for your time and for your generosity. We'll keep seeing each other, but I thank you so much, and good luck with all the projects that you have this year.
Thank you very much, Sandy. And thank you for all the important work that you do for spreading happiness in our little global village.
Thank you so much. Y a todos los que nos vieron y nos escucharon el día de hoy, muchísimas gracias por su atención. Si les gustó, si les parece importante este contenido, por favor ayúdanos a compartirlo, suscríbanse al canal, denle clic a la campanita y les agradezco muchísimo su atención. Nos estamos viendo por aquí próximamente. Yo soy Sandy Mora y esto es el Club de la Limonada, sacándole jugo a la vida.
Esto fue el Club de la Limonada, sacándole jugo a la vida. Gracias por acompañarnos. Nos vemos en el próximo episodio. Si te gustó, por favor comparte y suscríbete. Hasta la próxima.